Elysian wasn't a restaurant. It was a ritual. Each night, golden light from crystal chandeliers poured like honey onto the marble floors, reflecting off floor-to-ceiling windows that opened to a Central Park scene, glowing like an oil painting. The murmurs of the elite floated through the air like an instrumental piece soft composed and absolutely unbreakable. In a space designed to erase all emotion, Clara Mae Thompson moved like a silent weighted note. She didn't walk, she glided. Every step has a slow rhythm. Every pivot is a calculated motion down to the millimeter. Her right hand held a tray of Bordeaux, like she was cradling a delicate dance partner, her left arm extended just enough to keep balance the echoes of her past life on stage still present in her posture. Once she was called a rising star of modern ballet at Lincoln Center. Now Elysian was her final stage. No more backstage lighting, no more applause, just guests with Rolexes and orders that landed like commands. But Clara still danced in her own way, with the grace and precision of someone who once lived to perform. The staff break room at Elysian felt like a forgotten world, tiny, airless, filled with the mix of cheap perfume and industrial disinfectant. Clara sat on a folding chair, quietly pulling a phone from her apron. The screen lit up a wallpaper photo of Lily, 8 years old, beaming, holding a crayon, drawing a woman in a white dress spinning center stage. On Lily's chest, just beneath the hospital gown, was a scar, fading but still clear. Bing. A hospital notification, surgery payment due, deadline EO 7 to 14, $48,650. Clara swallowed hard. Sometimes she wished for a broken bone again. Broken bones can be cast, broken hearts can't. She drew in a deep breath, straightening her back, like she was preparing for an arabesque. Breathe, Clara, she whispered. Every step is a note in this survival symphony. Perform. Do it for her. She stood up, tucked the phone back into her apron, and pulled open the break room door light from the chandeliers wrapped around her once more as if the stage had just called out its lead. And Clara stepped into it. To the diners, she was just a waitress, with a quiet walk and a softer voice. But in Lily's mind, and in Clara's heart, she was still the queen of a fallen kingdom. Elysian operated like a Swiss machine, every inch of space precisely calculated, every staff member trained like ceremonial guards, and not a single beat allowed to go off rhythm, until Julian Croft walked in. He didn't enter, he infiltrated. No announcement, no theme music, no introduction. Just a glass door sliding open, and the fresh air from the elevator was suddenly replaced by something thicker, like unscented smoke. Clara was pouring wine at table 12 when she felt something shift. The lighting remained the same, and the sound of silverware clinking still floated in the air. But something in her heartbeat changed. An odd instinct made her glance over her shoulder, and there he was. Julian Croft wore a charcoal gray tailored suit, unbuttoned. His white shirt was casually unfastened at the top, his hair swept aside like he'd just stepped off a private helicopter. He looked at no one, walked directly to the best table in the room, the one that hosted the mayor last week, where a couple was already enjoying appetizers. The manager, a wiry man who always smiled, just enough rushed forward like he'd been shocked by electricity. "Mr. Croft, welcome back to Elysian." He bowed, sweat already breaking on his temples. Croft didn't reply. He glanced at the table, then at the couple sitting there. His eyes carried no anger, only emptiness. He turned to the manager and uttered just 3 words. "My table. Now." No yelling, no tantrum. Just a quiet redefinition of order. The couple was relocated. They didn't object, just tightened their lips and stood like people being expelled from paradise. Clara wasn't assigned to that table. Her shift covered the back alcove. But when she saw Croft, her body tensed like a stretched wire. His name and his cold-blooded cruelty was legend in high-end service circles. It was said he could make a waiter quit with nothing more than a prolonged stare. Croft sat with two others, a blonde woman in a suit and an Asian man who kept adjusting his glasses. Both looked clearly on edge. They were discussing a deal Billion's AI restructuring, but Croft wasn't listening. A young server only 2 weeks into his job at Elysian approached the table with a bottle of white wine. His hand trembled slightly, and then a single drop. Wine touched the sleeve of Croft's jacket. No one breathed. Croft placed his hand on the table, staring at the drop like it was a crime scene. Then slowly, he lifted his eyes, locking onto the server's face, no blinking, no words. A gaze so cold, it sliced skin. The boy nearly collapsed. His eyes welled up. He stammered an apology and bolted toward the kitchen. The manager sighed, then turned to Clara. "Clara, help me out. Take over Mr. Croft's table." She didn't respond. She simply nodded. A queen stepping onto the battlefield. Clara approached the table as if stepping onto a stage, but this time there were no spotlights, no overture, only Julian Croft's penetrating gaze and an atmosphere strung tight like an overwound violin string. "Good evening, Mr. Croft," she said, voice soft as silk. "Welcome back to Elysian." "May I, Evian?" he interrupted, not looking at her. New bottle. Exactly 4 degrees Celsius. No more, no less. Clara inclined her head slightly, a subtle, ballet-like bow. She turned and walked away without revealing anything on her face. But inside, the first cut had already been made. When she returned with a bottle chilled in the special kitchen freezer, Croft finally lifted his eyes. Soup of the day, roasted heirloom tomato with smoked paprika and goat cheese crostini, Clara replied evenly. Ingredients. Everyone. She didn't glance at the menu. She couldn't. He was testing her like one would test the memory of a machine. Tomato confit, caramelized shallots, smoked paprika sea salt, cracked pepper touch of cream, fresh basil house-made goat cheese on toasted sourdough. Silence. Croft didn't compliment her. He didn't nod, just raised one brow slightly as if to say, "That will do." For now. That was the second cut. Then he pulled out his phone. "Excuse me," he said, and began a call. No glance at her, no gesture to leave. Just left her standing there like a piece of furniture. 1 minute, 2, 3, 5 minutes. She remained motionless, statue-like. No shifting, no sign of discomfort. She had stood for hours during rehearsals, endured the agony of point shoes, but never had she felt this invisible. People noticed. Some gave sympathetic glances, others curious stares, but no one said a word. This was Croft. At Elysian Power, had the ability to freeze the air. When he finally ended the call, he spoke just one sentence. "You may go." The third cut deeper, bloodless, but shrinking her inch by inch. Clara turned away screaming inside, but her steps remained soft, her movements precise like performing a grand allegro. She wasn't allowed to break, not here, not while Lily was still waiting. She remembered the night before, Lily wrapping her arms around her and whispering, "Mommy, you look so pretty dancing in my picture. I drew you flying." The fortress of politeness was all she had left. The smile she wore wasn't to please, it was to survive. "Thank you, Mr. Croft. It's my pleasure," she said, as she walked away. Words no longer spoken in service, but worn like a fragile suit of armor against the quiet destruction seeping into her veins. Somewhere in the kitchen, the clock struck 8. 1 more hour to go. 1 more hour to protect her invisible crown. The A5 Wagyu steak pinnacle of indulgence was brought to the table like a sacred ritual. Crimson red meat, marbled like polished stone, grilled to perfect medium rare, and placed on fine Limoges porcelain with a drizzle of burgundy wine reduction. Clara set the plate down as if laying a sleeping child to rest, but her hand trembled not from the weight of the dish, but from the tightening air suffocating around her. Croft held his knife and fork like a surgeon. He cut a piece and chewed slowly. Very slowly, then suddenly clang. The sharp clatter of silver on porcelain cracked through the room like a slap across Elysian's elegant face, silencing even the soft piano notes. The dining room froze. Clara stood upright, eyes unblinking. Croft lifted his napkin from his lap and placed it on the table with icy indifference. Then he spoke, not loudly, but loud enough for every nearby table to hear. "Ms. Thompson," he said deliberately, using her name as a weapon. "The first strike. I've built billion-dollar companies on precision. This steak, like your performance tonight, is a failure." Clara didn't move, but her throat went dry. "It's not just about the temperature of the meat," Croft continued, voice smooth as a honed blade. "It's about the lack of care, the laziness, a mediocre attitude dressed up in grace." Clara could feel it now, dozens of eyes pinning her like needles through silk. Then the final blow. Perhaps that's why some people perform on grand stages, and others just clear plates. Clara's heart clenched, not because of the steak, not because of the insult, but because he had dragged her shattered dream into the light and crushed it beneath his polished leather shoes. No one said a word. No one laughed. Only silence remained, thick and suffocating, like black velvet draped over a coffin. So silent, the pour of wine at a nearby table sounded like a ticking clock. A single tear slid down Clara's cheek, slowly. No sobs, no breakdown. But she didn't wipe it away. She let it stay, like a glimmer against the darkness, a quiet defiance daring anyone to say she wasn't still standing. She wanted to run, but her feet were locked in place, like she was holding a final releve on stage. In her mind, Lily's voice echoed, "Mommy, when you fly, I think you're a superhero." Clara took a breath. Her chest rose not with fear, but with resolve. A storm was building, not from Croft, but from deep within her. No one moved. No wine glasses lifted. No forks touched the food. All of Elysian, the golden theater in the sky of Manhattan, held its breath, waiting to see if the exiled queen would bow or rise. Clara closed her eyes for one steady beat, then opened them. Inside her, a door swung open. Not the instinct of a server, not the reflex of a tired mother, but the memory of a principled dancer bowing before thousands. She stood tall, her shoulders no longer slumped from habitual submission. Her spine was a taut bowstring, drawn and ready. Her chin lifted. Her eyes stopped seeking approval. She was no longer standing before Julian Croft. She was evaluating him. His hand still rested lazily on the table, eyes cold, confident as always. Clara glanced at his wrist. A Patek Philippe limited edition platinum case glinting under the chandelier's light. She spoke, not loudly, but each word carved through the air like a blade into fine wood. "Mr. Croft, your watch can buy you all the time in the world." A hush swept through the room, breathless stillness. Clara tilted her head, lips curving slightly as if tuning a violin before a grand performance. "But it can't buy you a single moment of grace." Silence. A different kind of silence, not born of fear, but disbelief. From a quiet corner, a single clap rang out. Slow, steady, unmistakable. All eyes turned. An older woman in a blush silk gown. Her silver hair was pinned neatly, her gaze bright, warm, and proud. Eleanor Vance, a legend in finance. The woman who once risked her entire fortune on an unknown programmer named Julian Croft. Another clap, then another. The restaurant slowly joined in, not loud, not explosive, but rhythmic, reverent, as if bowing to a real performance. Clara stood still in the gentle storm of applause. No bow, no tears, just a smile. Soft, small, enough for a little girl in a hospital bed in Brooklyn to see her mother dancing in the sky. The Patek Philippe still gleamed, but the power it once held on Croft's wrist no longer felt so heavy. Applause still echoed as he shoved his chair back and stood abruptly. The dark leather chair toppled with a crash, skidding across the marble floor, its screech sharp and grating like metal dragging across glass. Croft didn't yell. At first, he leaned toward Clara, his face flushed, with something power had never taught him to manage humiliation. "Who do you think you are?" he hissed, his voice like gasoline fumes before ignition. "A cheap little waitress with a tearjerker speech. You think that makes you better than me?" Clara said nothing. She just stood there, still silent, like a statue in a plaza, her slender frame haloed by the chandelier's soft glow. Croft looked around, disbelieving at the faces staring back. People who once avoided his gaze were now meeting it head-on with astonishment and quiet contempt. His ego cracked, his mask fell. "I'll buy this dump," Croft roared, his voice shaking. "Turn it into a parking lot. You'll never work in this city again. I swear it." He yanked out his wallet. The movement was sharp, practiced. From it, he pulled the American Express Centurion card, black sleek, the ultimate symbol of a man who never had to ask the price. He slammed it onto the table. Whack, that tiny piece of plastic landed like a death sentence. "Charge the meal," he snarled, "and use the change to teach your staff how to behave." The manager rushed over, pale, eyes locked on the card, not daring to look elsewhere. Croft cast one last glance at Clara, no longer smug, just a man stripped bare, trembling before a crowd that no longer feared him. He turned. His two associates scrambled after him. The elevator chimed open, ding, and then closed behind them, sealing away the fiercest storm Elysian had ever weathered. Silence. Not the stunned silence from before, not the silence of awe, but the quiet that follows a hurricane. Clara stood still, not smiling, not triumphant, just shaking. The adrenaline drained. A tidal wave of exhaustion was crashing into her. The room slowly exhaled. Life returned. The manager, Mr. Simon, approached. His hair was damp with sweat. The black card was still in his hand, though his eyes were no longer on it. He looked at Clara, longer than usual, then opened his mouth. Quietly, "Clara, my office. Now." The words dropped like the final bead of water in an overflowing glass, and Clara, like someone about to hear the verdict of her trial, followed. The office door clicked shut behind Clara with a soft sound that felt more like a warning than a welcome. Mr. Simon, the manager, sat behind his desk, not looking at her right away. He stared at his monitor in silence. The room was thick with the smell of stale coffee and old paper. Clara stood still, hands clenched. She wasn't trembling from fear of being fired, but from thinking of Lily. The health insurance, the surgery bills. If she lost this job. Simon exhaled quietly, then turned the screen toward her. A video, vertical, low resolution, but the audio was painfully clear. Croft's voice. Maybe that's why some people perform on grand stages. Clara's voice, but it can't buy you a single moment of grace. Then the applause. Clara blinked, confused. "Who?" "A guest." "No idea who shot it," Simon replied, tapping the desk. "But it's gone viral. Nearly 2 million views in the past hour." Clara's heart pounded. Not from sudden fame, but from the terrifying loss of control. A few hours later, in a penthouse just a few blocks away, Eleanor Vance sat in front of her TV. The blush silk gown still hugged her frame, a glass of white wine in her hand. Her eyes didn't leave the CNN segment, playing again and again. The headline read, "Waitress Stuns Billionaire," with one sentence. Elysian incident goes viral. The camera shook. Light flared off Croft's Patek Philippe. And then, Clara, standing tall, steady, eyes slicing through the illusion that Croft had controlled for far too long. Eleanor smiled. Not a warm smile. A cold, razor-sharp smile. Finally, she murmured. Someone called him by his real name. Her phone buzzed. A message from an old reporter. "Was it true you were the first to clap?" She didn't respond. Instead, Eleanor opened her laptop and began typing. An op-ed, sent directly to the Wall Street Journal. Title, "The Monster I Helped Build." She told it all, how she funded Croft when he was just a kid in a garage, how he ousted her from the board after the IPO, how he turned coldness into a corporate culture. She ended with a short paragraph, "I didn't clap for a comeback. I clapped for a dignity that cannot be bought or broken, and I'm sorry I once failed to see it." 2 days later, Croft Corp's stock plummeted. The board called an emergency meeting. "You Should Grace Not Gold" trended across every platform, and in a quiet cafe in Brooklyn, Clara sat across from Eleanor. Not for a check, not for pity. Eleanor spoke. "You didn't ask for anything, but you reminded me why I once loved art. Loved people like you, people who still stand after everything." She offered Clara a position at a new foundation, the Vance Fund, supporting struggling artists. Not just a good salary, but health coverage, safety, and a path back to herself. Clara cried. But this time, they were tears of relief. 6 months later, autumn had just arrived in Manhattan. Golden leaves drifted onto the glass roof of the Vance Community Arts Center, tucked quietly between 72nd Street and Central Park West. No flashy sign, no revolving glass door. Just a simple wooden entrance where children from struggling families could walk in and dare to dream. Upstairs in the second-floor ballet studio, music floated from an old Bluetooth speaker. Not grand symphonies, just a stripped-down piano remix of Clair de Lune. Gentle, like morning mist. And in the center of that room, Clara was teaching. No black uniform, no silver tray. Just ballet socks, bare feet, and a radiant gaze that lit up every time a child hit the beat just right. "Keep your chin up, sweetie, like there's a thread pulling you to the sky," she said gently, guiding the frizzy-haired girl at the front of the line. She was no longer the waitress who made a room full of elites clap. She was now a teacher, an artist, a mother who had walked through a storm and come back carrying the sun. In the corner of the room, Lily sat on a small wooden chair sketchpad in her lap. Her tiny heartbeat was strong, beneath a faint scar, a trophy of survival. Lily was drawing her mother in colored pencil, surrounded by a soft glow like stage lights. The picture didn't have chandeliers, no Egyptian silk tablecloths, just her mom in a simple leotard, a gentle smile, arms outstretched as if holding the world together. Lily looked up and whispered, "Mom, you look like a fairy." Clara laughed, walked over, and crouched down beside her. Not a fairy, sweetheart, just someone who finally found where she belongs. They hugged, and in the warm, late-morning light, reflected from the studio mirror, there was no trace of a woman who had once been broken. There was only someone who had learned to fly again on her own feet. This story doesn't end in revenge, but in restoration. Not with punishment, but with a quiet belief in grace. Clara didn't topple an empire, but she rekindled something the world thought it had lost: dignity, elegance, and the kind of courage that doesn't need to shout. You've just finished a journey that reached for the heart, from the shadows of a restaurant to the light of a new dawn. If this story made you cry, smile, or simply believe a little more in people, please like, subscribe, and share Toch Story, where small stories move the world. Thank you for staying until the very end. We'll see you in the next story.